There is a reason why God calls us to guard our hearts, for out of it flows the wellspring of life. If your emotions are left unguarded, they become open gates for chaos to walk in. Anger invites destruction. Jealousy invites resentment. Fear opens the door to doubt, and unchecked sorrow can sink the soul into despair. But when your emotions are surrendered to God, He becomes the gatekeeper of your inner world. He watches over your heart like a fortress, shielding it from the arrows of overreaction, deception, and emotional sabotage. Do not be deceived. Your emotions are not always honest. They often lie. They speak from wounds that have not healed, from disappointments that still bleed, from expectations that were never fulfilled. And if you listen to every emotion as though it were truth, you will drift far from God's plan and closer to the cliffs of regret. Hear this: not every feeling deserves to be followed. Not every tear needs to fall publicly. Not every opinion needs to be voiced. Real maturity is when you pause long enough to ask, is this emotion leading me toward God or away from Him? That is the question that separates the wise from the impulsive. That is the question that builds legacies instead of ruins them. Because controlling your emotions isn't about pretending you feel nothing. It's about knowing how to respond when everything in you is trembling. And God honors the one who chooses discipline over disaster. He honors the one who says, yes, I feel broken, but I will not lash out. Yes, I feel offended, but I will not destroy with my words. Yes, I am afraid, but I will not let fear be my master. This is not weakness. This is the highest form of strength, a strength that flows not from muscles or might, but from submission to the will of God. And do not think for 1 second that God is silent in your moments of emotional turmoil. No, He is closest when the storm inside you rages the loudest. He is watching, waiting, whispering, let me take this from you. Let me quiet the fire. Let me give you my peace. But the problem is, many of us run to everything else before we run to God. We run to distractions, to validation, to venting, to bitterness, to revenge, and when these things fail to heal us, we collapse, wondering why peace won't come. Peace only comes when you go to the source of it. And God is not just the creator of peace, He is peace. You cannot find calmness if you keep feeding your emotions with chaos. You cannot find clarity if you are drowning your mind in noise. You cannot be free if you are always reacting. So stop reacting and start reflecting. Before you speak, reflect. Before you post, reflect. Before you accuse, reflect. Before you accuse, reflect. Before you accuse, reflect. Before you explode, reflect. And in that moment of reflection, invite God into the decision. Because when God enters that moment, He gives you perspective. He shows you the end from the beginning. He reminds you that this feeling, this anger, this fear, this sadness is temporary, but the damage it can cause may not be. So choose restraint, choose stillness, choose to pause, not because you're weak, but because you are led by something higher than emotion. You are led by divine wisdom. You are guided by the one who sees beyond the now. And what a gift it is to not be controlled by how you feel, but to be led by what you know, that God is greater than your storm, that God is stronger than your struggle, that God's voice is more powerful than your emotion. If you trust Him, truly trust Him, then your emotions become a tool, not a trap. They can be used to serve you, not sabotage you. Anger can become holy boldness. Sadness can turn into compassion. Fear can become reverence, but only when surrendered to God. Left to yourself, your emotions will use you. But under God's authority, they will serve you. That is the difference between bondage and freedom. That is the difference between chaos and purpose. And every day you must choose, will I be led by fleeting emotion or will I be anchored in eternal truth? There is a sacred strength in silence, an inner power in restraint that the world often mocks but God honors. In a culture where people are applauded for speaking first and thinking later, where every offense must be answered, every emotion expressed, and every slight avenged, the one who chooses stillness is seen as weak. But in truth, it is far more powerful to hold your peace than to lose your temper. God never created you to be reactive like a leaf tossed by the wind. You were created to be rooted like a tree planted by the waters, unshaken, unmoved, steady. Emotions come and go like storms, but your faith must be constant. And that constancy can only come when you hand your emotions over to the one who knows the depths of your soul. He knows why you feel the way you feel. He sees the history behind your triggers. He sees the childhood pain that fuels your anger, the hidden rejection that drives your insecurity, the silent fears that tighten your chest in the dark. But even with all that, He still calls you to rise above it. He does not excuse you based on your wounds. He calls you to healing so you are no longer bound by them. And that healing begins when you say, God, I don't want to be a prisoner of my emotions anymore. I don't want to destroy relationships because I couldn't hold my tongue. I don't want to damage my future because I couldn't process my past. That kind of surrender, raw, real, unfiltered, is where true emotional control is born. Because God does not give you surface level peace. He works from the inside out. He transforms your heart, renews your mind, strengthens your will, and teaches you how to walk in patience, even when everything in you wants to run wild. The world will keep telling you to express yourself, but not everything in you is worth expressing. Some thoughts were never meant to see the light. Some feelings were only meant to be laid down before God in secret. Because if you keep pouring your emotions out on everyone around you, you'll start bleeding on people who didn't cut you. That's not healing, that's harm. God says, come to Him with your emotions, not just your actions. Come to Him with your sadness, your rage, your confusion, your doubt, your shame. Lay it all down. Let Him sort it out. Let Him wash it in His wisdom. Because if you don't process your emotions with God, you will end up projecting them onto the world. You'll see enemies where there are none. You'll mistake correction for attack. You'll think God is silent when He's simply telling you to be still. Stillness is not punishment, it's protection. God is not asking you to suppress your emotions. He's asking you to surrender them. And when you do, you'll find that the fire of rage becomes a light of discernment, that the tears of sorrow become rivers of compassion, and that the winds of fear no longer carry you because God Himself becomes your anchor. And when God is your anchor, you can walk into the chaos of life and remain untouched by the waves. People can misunderstand you, mock you, attack you, and still you will not lose your peace. That is not natural, that is divine. That is the result of a soul mastered by God, not by fleeting feelings. Emotions are meant to be signals, not steering wheels. They can alert you, but they should never lead you. Only God should lead you. And when you let Him lead, even your emotions begin to align with His truth. Your heart begins to calm. Your reactions begin to change. The same people who once provoked you will lose their power over you. Why? Because God is now the one shaping your responses. And His responses are always filled with purpose, never impulsive. That is the true victory, when you no longer have to win arguments to feel in control. When you no longer have to shout to feel heard. When you no longer have to shout to feel heard. When you no longer need revenge to feel validated. Because God has filled you so deeply that the opinions of others no longer stir the storm. And even if the storm rages, it cannot enter your spirit. You have been sealed. You have been strengthened. You have been taught by the Most High how to rule your own soul. And that is something no person, no insult, no betrayal can take away from you. But understand this level of emotional strength does not come overnight. It is built. It is forged in the fires of daily surrender. It is practiced in the moments when you want to lose control, but choose to pray instead. It is built when you want to lash out, but choose to walk away. It is strengthened when you are tempted to speak in anger but choose to speak life instead. Every time you choose God over your emotion, you are building spiritual muscle. You are becoming unshakable. And that is what God wants for you. Not to be cold, not to be distant, but to be wise, disciplined, and strong. So that when the emotional waves rise, you are not tossed around like everyone else. You stand tall. You breathe deeply. You say nothing if God hasn't spoken. And in your silence, in your calm, in your self-control, people will see something in you they cannot explain. They will see the mark of God's authority resting on your spirit. And that, my friend, is how you rise, not through emotional explosions, but through divine composure. The kind that only comes from walking daily with God. The world will tempt you daily to lose your emotional footing. You will be tested not once, not twice, but over and over again. Someone will say something sharp just to see if you bleed. Someone will push your buttons to see if you explode. Situations will arise to try to make you question your worth, your identity, your purpose. And in those moments, your emotions will rise like a wave. But hear this clearly. Just because the wave rises doesn't mean you have to drown in it. When you belong to God, you have authority over the wave. You have the right to say, "No, I will not lose myself today." You can feel the heat of anger without letting it consume you. You can acknowledge the sting of pain without becoming bitter. That is not emotional suppression, it is spiritual awareness. And too many people confuse surrender with silence. But silence alone is not power. Power comes when your silence is filled with purpose, when your restraint is grounded in God's strength, when your peace is not passive but active, guarding your spirit like a soldier at the gate. God does not call you to be a victim of your emotions. He calls you to master them, not by might, not by pretending you feel nothing, but by constantly pouring every emotion back into His hands. Let Him mold it. Let Him filter it. Because your heart cannot lead you well if it's unhealed. Your thoughts cannot guide you if they are ruled by wounds. But when you spend time with God, when you pour out your frustrations, your confusions, your fears to Him in secret, He begins to clean the emotional lens through which you see the world. And suddenly, what once made you explode now makes you pause. What once made you retreat now makes you rise. This is the work of God, and it is not always loud. Sometimes it's in the quiet transformation of a soul that no longer bends to chaos. You start noticing it in the way you carry yourself, in the way you no longer explain yourself to everyone. You no longer react to every opinion, every criticism, every mood swing of others. Why? Because your spirit is now anchored in something deeper than emotion. It is anchored in God. And that anchor keeps you steady in storms that used to destroy you. Make no mistake, emotional maturity is not a personality trait. It is a spiritual weapon. When others lose their heads, you keep your crown. When others throw stones, you build bridges. Not because you are soft, but because God has taught you that peace is more powerful than vengeance. And He honors those who choose His way over their feelings. He lifts up those who humble their emotions and exalt His wisdom. And when you walk with that kind of strength, the world begins to take notice. People wonder how you stay so calm in the middle of chaos, how you smile when others are angry, how you remain respectful when disrespected. But what they don't see is the secret place, the hours you spent on your knees asking God to calm your heart, the private battles you fought to not give in to the rage, the silent tears you cried while asking God to give you the strength to keep your mouth shut, to walk away, to not lose control. That is where emotional power is born, in the place where no one is watching but God, and God sees. He sees every time you choose peace over war. He sees every time you choose understanding over reaction, and He rewards it not with applause but with wisdom with favor, with inner stability that no man can give and no man can take away. The ability to control your emotions is not weakness, it is alignment. Alignment with the will of God, alignment with the character of God. You become a vessel through which peace flows into rooms filled with conflict. You become a calming presence in an agitated world, not because you have no emotions, but because your emotions have been placed under divine management. That's the secret. Not to fight your feelings, but to guide them. To tell your anger, you may knock, but you don't get to enter. To tell your sadness, you may sit with me, but you will not define me. To tell your fear, you may whisper, but I choose to trust God's voice instead. This is how you take back your life, one emotion at a time, brought into the light of God's truth. You are not unstable, you are not too broken, you are not too reactive. You are simply a soul that needs to return to its center. God, let Him be your compass. Let Him be your calm. And the next time your emotions rise like a flood, you'll know what to do. You'll go higher, you'll rise above, because you've learned that the one who walks with God does not follow feelings. They follow purpose. And that purpose, when fueled by God's strength, will carry you through every test without losing the treasure of peace He placed inside you. When you understand that emotions are not your identity, everything begins to shift. You begin to see your anger not as a curse, but as a call to awareness. You begin to recognize that your fear is not the end of you. It's a signal to lean harder on God. Too often, people let a temporary emotion define a permanent identity. They say, I am an angry person, or I'm just emotional, or that's just how I am. No, that is not how God designed you. That is how pain shaped you. That is how trauma trained you. But God never intended your emotions to be your master. He intended them to be your servants. When you allow your emotions to dictate your actions, you give them power they were never meant to have. But when you bring those emotions to God, you take back your authority. And hear me now, there is no emotion too dark, too heavy, too messy for God to handle. He already knows what you feel. He already knows what you're holding back. You don't need to filter yourself in His presence. He invites you to be real with Him so He can be real with you. When you say, God, I am overwhelmed, I am on the edge, I'm about to break, that is not weakness, that is wisdom. Because it takes spiritual maturity to admit you need divine help. And the moment you do, something begins to shift inside of you. God doesn't just take the emotion away. Sometimes He lets it stay so He can train you through it. Because the goal is not just peace in still waters. The goal is peace in the storm. Anybody can be calm when everything is going right. But emotional control is tested when nothing is going right, when the pressure is high, when the attacks come from every angle, and you still choose to respond with grace, with restraint, with dignity. That is where you grow. That is where God trains the warrior in you. And let me tell you, there is a warrior in you. Not a warrior of noise, but a warrior of wisdom. A warrior who knows when to speak and when to stay silent. A warrior who knows when to speak and when to stay silent. A warrior who knows when to walk away and when to stand firm. Not every battle is worth your energy. Not every offense deserves your reply. Sometimes the greatest victory is your silence. Sometimes the most powerful weapon you have is peace. Because peace confuses the enemy. When the enemy expects you to explode and you stay calm, you shift the atmosphere. When others expect you to retaliate and you choose mercy, you disarm their control. That kind of power cannot be faked. It must be forged, and it is forged in the secret place where your emotions bow before God's authority and your reactions are filtered through His truth. But don't think for a moment that this process will always be easy. There will be days when you want to give in, days when your emotions scream louder than your prayers, days when you feel like you're slipping back into your old ways. And in those moments, you must remind yourself you are not who you used to be. You may feel the old emotions rising, but you don't have to let them rule you. You may feel the urge to snap, to vent, to explode, but you have a choice now. You have the wisdom of God planted deep inside you, and it is stronger than your impulses. Emotions are quick. They want resolution now. But God is patient. God works over time. And the more you trust Him with your emotional responses, the more your spirit becomes disciplined. Discipline doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you don't bow. It means you acknowledge the feeling but refuse to let it rule. And this kind of strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's found in a whisper, in a breath, in the decision to say, God, take over. That quiet moment of surrender is more powerful than any outburst. Because in that moment, you're not just avoiding conflict, you're building character. You're laying the foundation for future peace. You're protecting the version of yourself that God is shaping. Because every time you choose emotional control, you are preserving your purpose. You are guarding your anointing. You are maintaining your clarity. And that clarity is priceless in a world drowning in confusion. When you see through God's eyes, you understand that not everything requires a reaction. Some things require prayer. Some things require distance. Some things require silence. That's not avoidance. It's alignment. And when you live in alignment with God, you begin to experience a freedom that no emotional chaos can destroy. You walk differently. You speak differently. You move through the fire without being burned. Not because you're emotionless, but because your emotions are no longer your God. God is. And when He takes His rightful place in your heart, you will begin to experience a peace that surpasses understanding. A peace that cannot be shaken by betrayal, insult, or pain. Because God will not only calm the storm around you, He will calm the storm within you. And when that happens, you won't just survive life's challenges, you'll master them, one emotion at a time. Do not underestimate the damage that uncontrolled emotions can bring into your life. One word spoken in wrath can pierce deeper than a sword. One decision made in haste can open doors you were never meant to walk through. One moment of pride can shut out blessings God was preparing to pour over your life. You must understand, emotional control is not just about behaving better. It is about protecting your destiny. It is about building a spiritual shield around what God has placed inside you. Because when the enemy can't steal your faith, he'll come after your peace. He'll use frustration to poison your joy. He'll use offense to make you bitter. He'll use stress to make you impatient. And once you start reacting emotionally to everything, you become vulnerable, easy to manipulate, easy to offend, easy to derail. But when your emotions are governed by God, you become a different kind of person. You are no longer easily provoked. You don't jump at every insult. You don't lose sleep over every disagreement. You begin to live above the noise. And that is where God wants you, above the noise, above the chaos, above the emotional drama of life. You may still feel it, but you are no longer ruled by it. This is not the result of positive thinking or personality. It is the result of spiritual transformation. When you spend time with God, when you consistently surrender your feelings to Him, He rewires how you think, how you perceive, how you respond. You begin to see life through a higher lens. And from that view, you no longer panic. You no longer rage. You no longer crumble. You understand that emotions are not enemies, but neither are they leaders. They must take their place behind wisdom, behind faith, behind discernment. And when emotions submit to God's truth, they begin to serve your purpose instead of destroying it. Anger turns into courage. Sadness turns into understanding. Even fear, when placed before God, becomes reverence, not panic. But this doesn't happen overnight. It happens moment by moment when you choose God's way over your own. When you say, I could react, but I won't. I could scream, but I'll be still. I could hate, but I'll choose peace. These choices may feel small, but they are victories in the realm of the Spirit. Every time you win over your emotions, you grow. Every time you resist the urge to explode, you gain strength. Every time you say no to your flesh and yes to God, you become more powerful than you were the day before. And that kind of power is rare. But it is real. And it is available to the one who walks daily in surrender to God. And perhaps one of the greatest lies ever told is that emotions are more authentic than faith. That how you feel should always be followed no matter the cost. But that's not truth, that's deception. Because your feelings, while real, are not always right. And if you allow them to take the lead, they will lead you into destruction. But when God becomes your center, He teaches you how to filter every emotion through His wisdom. He teaches you how to slow down, to breathe, to pause and reflect before you act. He teaches you how to become steady in an unsteady world. And let me tell you something, there is a deep, holy strength in emotional steadiness. Not numbness, not denial, but spiritual control. A strength that keeps you from burning bridges that God built. A strength that keeps you from wounding those you love. A strength that preserves your relationships, your calling, your peace, because not every battle is external, many are internal. You may smile on the outside, but be at war on the inside. And if that war is not surrendered to God, it will eventually spill out and affect everything around you. That's why the battlefield of emotions must be taken seriously. That's why you must daily bring your soul before God and say, "Search me, clean me, reorder what's out of place." And God, in His mercy, will respond, not with shame, but with correction. Not with punishment, but with guidance. He will begin to show you why you feel what you feel. He will expose the roots of your reactions. He will peel back the layers of old wounds, pride, fear, and unmet needs. And as painful as that process may be, it is the path to freedom. Because when you understand the why behind your emotions, you are no longer trapped by them. You begin to heal. You begin to grow. You begin to see that your emotions were never the enemy, only the unmanaged parts of your soul that needed God's order. And once He brings that order, you become powerful, not in noise, not in reaction, but in presence. You walk into situations that once overwhelmed you, and now you are unmoved. You face triggers that used to break you, and now you respond with wisdom. That is the work of God. That is the fruit of surrender. And that is what awaits every person who says, "God, teach me to master my emotions, not with coldness, but with truth. Not with pride, but with purpose. Not for people's approval, but so I may fulfill the calling You placed over my life with clarity, courage, and peace." There is a kind of freedom that only comes when you no longer allow your emotions to lead your life. It is not the freedom the world talks about, the kind that chases every feeling and calls it truth. No, this is a deeper freedom, a freedom that comes when your emotions are placed under the authority of God and not the authority of your mood or your environment. You begin to see things differently. You begin to respond from wisdom instead of impulse. And that shift, that inner transformation, begins to create peace, not just around you, but within you. You no longer need to defend yourself every time you're misunderstood, because you know that God sees your heart. You no longer have to control every outcome because you trust that God is working even when you don't see it. You no longer have to exhaust yourself trying to prove your point because you have learned that some things are better handled in silence and prayer. You stop feeding arguments that were designed to pull you out of your peace. You stop fighting battles that God never assigned to you. You begin to let go, not because you're giving up, but because you are growing up. And spiritual growth looks like restraint. It looks like holding back when everything in you wants to retaliate. It looks like lifting your hands in prayer instead of using them to harm. It looks like crying in God's presence instead of screaming in someone else's face. That kind of emotional control is not weakness. It is strength at its highest form. It is the strength of a person who knows where their help comes from. It is the strength of someone who trusts that God will defend them, vindicate them, heal them, and fight for them. It is the power of one who no longer needs to be right to be at peace. Because peace is not found in victory over people, it is found in victory over your own spirit. And when you learn to master your emotions through God, you become unshakable. The world may shift, but you remain grounded. People may disappoint you, but you remain stable. Because your reactions are no longer determined by others, they are anchored in your relationship with God. That kind of life is rare, but it is possible. And it begins when you say, God, take control, teach me to respond, not react. Teach me to reflect before I speak. Teach me to trust you more than I trust my own emotions. Because emotions, though real and powerful, were never meant to be the compass of your life. If you live by emotion, you will always be up one day and down the next, happy when things go well, crushed when they don't. But when God becomes your compass, even in your deepest feelings, you remain steady. You may still cry, but you will not collapse. You may still get angry, but you will not destroy. You may still feel fear, but you will not run. Because now your responses are filtered through a deeper knowing, an inner security that God is in control. That even when things feel out of control, He is still holding you. He is still guiding you. He is still teaching you how to carry your emotions without letting them carry you away. And this is where your greatest growth will take place. Not in the moments of applause, but in the moments of pressure. When your emotions press hard against your peace and you choose peace anyway. When the urge to lash out rises like fire, but you extinguish it with prayer. When your heart breaks, but you keep walking in purpose. That is strength. That is faith. That is obedience. And obedience brings reward. Not always immediately, but deeply. God begins to entrust you with more influence, more clarity, more spiritual authority, because He knows you are not led by your emotions, you are led by Him. And He can trust those who are emotionally mature with greater responsibility. But this isn't just about blessings, it's about becoming. Becoming the person God envisioned when He formed you, not ruled by emotions, not reactive, not tossed around by every wind of offense or storm of conflict, but mature, disciplined, discerning, steady, rooted. That is what God is building in you, and that's why He allows tests, not to break you, but to reveal you, to show you where you still need to grow, to show you what still triggers you, to show you what still needs healing. And when you see it, don't run, don't suppress it, don't ignore it. Bring it to God. Say, here it is, God, this anger, this pain, this fear, this pride, I lay it before you. Change me. And He will. Not always in a flash, but steadily, powerfully, quietly, from the inside out, until one day you realize you no longer respond the way you used to. You no longer fall apart the way you once did. You've been transformed. Not by willpower, but by surrender. Not by performance, but by God's power working in your soul. There comes a point in your journey where you begin to realize that mastering your emotions is not just about protecting yourself, it's about preserving your purpose. Your calling is too great to be constantly derailed by emotional reactions. Your destiny is too sacred to be thrown off course by momentary feelings. God did not place you here to be swayed by the winds of mood swings and instability. He placed you here to carry something eternal, and anything eternal must be protected. Emotional discipline is not just self-help, it is soul preservation. When you keep losing your temper, you delay your progress. When you keep giving in to offense, you distance yourself from growth. When you act out of insecurity, you stop short of the confidence that God is trying to build in you. But when you stand still and let God rule your reactions, the ground beneath your feet begins to solidify. Suddenly, the things that used to shake you don't anymore. The people who used to provoke you can't anymore. The situations that used to drain you fade into silence because you've changed. You no longer give your power away to people who didn't create you. You no longer hand your peace to situations that have no eternal weight, because now you've tasted something better. You've experienced what it feels like to walk in God's composure, to live from the inside out, not the outside in. And that shift changes everything. You begin to pray more than you speak. You begin to think more than you react. You begin to love more deeply, because your love is no longer conditional on how others treat you. You are not living based on feelings. You are living based on God's truth. And that truth grounds you, holds you, lifts you. You become the kind of person who brings calm into chaos, who speaks life when others curse, who builds where others destroy. Not because you're perfect, not because you don't feel, but because you've surrendered those feelings into the hands of the one who made you. And he has reshaped you from the inside. He has given you authority over the very emotions that once ruled you. And now, you are not a slave. You are a steward. You steward your anger. You steward your sorrow. You steward your joy. And in doing so, you walk in power. Quiet, unshakable, God-given power. And so, as you go forward, remember this: every emotion is an opportunity to choose, either to bow to the flesh or to rise in faith. Anger will come, but you don't have to serve it. Fear will knock, but you don't have to answer. Sorrow will whisper, but you don't have to surrender. You have a choice. And every time you choose God's way over your own, you are not just becoming better, you are becoming who you were always meant to be: strong, grounded, wise, peaceful. And not because life is easy, but because God is with you. This is not about pretending. This is not about suppression. This is not about hiding how you feel. It is about inviting God into every emotion and letting Him purify it, direct it, and use it for good. You can be real and still be righteous. You can feel deeply and still respond wisely. You can be fully human and still fully surrendered. That's what God desires, not perfection, but partnership. He wants to walk with you through the messiness of your heart and bring clarity where there's confusion, healing where there's hurt, order where there's chaos. So don't run from your emotions, run to God with them. Don't deny what you feel. Lay it down at His feet. Let Him show you what to keep and what to cast off. Let Him show you what to keep and what to cast off. Let Him teach you when to speak and when to be silent. Let Him shape your reactions until they reflect His character, not your past. Because the more you walk with God, the more you will find yourself becoming steady in a world that trembles. You will find yourself walking in rooms that once made you anxious, and you'll be calm. You will hear the same insults that once broke you, and you'll be unmoved. You will face the same pressures, and you'll be grounded. That's the transformation God offers. That's the strength He gives. A strength not built on denial, but on divine order. A peace not built on avoidance, but on truth. A self-control not born from effort, but from surrender. So let today be the day you say, God, I will no longer be ruled by my emotions. I will no longer give away my peace. I will no longer let feelings dictate my future. From this day forward, you will lead and I will follow. You will guide my heart and I will obey. And when you make that decision, not once, but every day, you will see God shape your emotions into something holy, something powerful, something stable, and you will rise not as someone tossed by the wind, but as someone anchored in God, unmoved, unshaken, and unstoppable. So now the choice is yours. You can continue living at the mercy of emotions that rise and fall like the tides. Or you can anchor your soul in the unshakable presence of God. You can continue reacting to every insult, every delay, every fear, or you can pause, breathe, surrender, and let God respond for you. This isn't weakness, this is wisdom. This isn't silence, this is strength. Because when you let God lead your emotions, you no longer live as a slave to chaos, you live as a vessel of purpose. You become calm in the storm. You become a reflection of divine steadiness in a world ruled by noise. So let this be your declaration. No more emotional bondage. No more living by impulse. No more giving away your peace to people who didn't give it to you. From this day forward, you walk in emotional discipline, not because of your own power, but because God walks with you. He fights your battles. He steadies your heart. He trains your reactions. And with God leading your spirit, there is no storm too great, no feeling too overwhelming, no wound too deep that He cannot heal, calm, and restore. Walk in that power, live in that strength, and never again let emotions lead where only God belongs.